Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairytales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christianson. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it. Okay, so hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, hyperthyroidism. What have you got? Is there some mix of these things? Let's make sense out of all of this. So first off, Hashimoto's. I'm going to start with that one. Hiroko Hashimoto was a Japanese doctor who, back in 1907, discovered that most thyroid disease was caused by the immune system. So we still name that after him. Somewhere around a quarter of adults have the antibodies that can be associated with Hashimoto's. So that's the most common category for starters. Now, a subset of people with Hashimoto's have their thyroid glands give out, and then the thyroid can no longer make adequate amounts of hormone. That's called hypothyroidism. So that's more rare. Hashimoto's is more common. But if you think that through, most people who have hypothyroidism, they have it because of Hashimoto's. Now, there are those who have Hashimoto's and don't have signs of it, the most common ones being positive thyroid antibodies on blood tests. This is called seronegative Hashimoto's, and numbers differ, but somewhere around half of those with Hashimoto's may be seronegative. So what about those who have hypothyroidism for other causes? How common is that? Well, it's pretty rare. Most data suggests that upwards of 95, 97% of those with hypothyroidism have it because of Hashimoto's. So let's recap so far. So you can have Hashimoto's, but you may not have hypothyroidism. You can have an immune attack, but it hasn't made your thyroid shut down. And actually, most people with Hashimoto's never get hypothyroidism. I hear some experts talk about stages of Hashimoto's as if there's always this progression that eventually leads to the thyroid shutting down. That's just not true. There's different kinds of Hashimoto's, but the most common kinds never lead to the gland shutting down. So yeah, most people can have Hashimoto's and not have hypothyroidism. Now, hypothyroidism exists in different levels. Some are more severe than others. But really, the main thing that's relevant is that the severe level that we call overt hypothyroidism, that's the only stage in which the body is actually missing out on thyroid hormones. All the other stages are just risk factors towards that. But yeah, mild and moderate hypothyroidism aren't really a lack of thyroid hormone. So how do we know which stage someone is in? Well, the severe one is most obvious. So in that case, TSH levels are super high. And TSH, this stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. This is a hormone from the pituitary gland telling the thyroid to work. And the tricky thing here, it's backward. So when your thyroid really shuts off, the TSH gets high. And what's happening is the pituitary is yelling at the thyroid, begging it to work. So what does high mean? Well, that means like more than 20, more than 50, like way up there. And when that happens, then the hormones coming out of the thyroid, they're kaput. They're not there. They're not measurable. They're very low, like way below range. And the most common hormone made is T4. So severe hypothyroidism, also called overt, that's a high TSH, like more than 20, and a T4 way below the normal range. Not low side of normal, way below the range. Now that scenario is rare, but that's really the only one that's true hypothyroidism. Before that, we can see the TSH high normal, elevated, but with the T4 still within range. Those are called mild or moderate hypothyroidism or subclinical hypothyroidism, but there's not really a lack of thyroid hormones at this point. And once you wrap your head around that fact, it becomes obvious that's why medications don't help. So yeah, medications contain something to make up for what the body is not making. But it's only at overt hypothyroidism that the body's not making something. So when you take someone who's not missing something and put more of that thing there, they won't feel better because that's not the problem. So yeah, that's the most straightforward reason for that. So in natural medicine, there's a lot of talk about optimal thyroid levels. And a lot of this has to do with the TH, TSH, the T4, the T3. And given that the TSH is backward, many talk about it's optimal to have a TSH on the low side of normal, like between 0.5 and 2. And the valid side of this is if someone does need medication, they may feel better when they're given enough to make the TSH go to the low side of normal. That's totally true. But it doesn't follow that anyone with a TSH above 2 therefore would benefit by going on medication. The one doesn't follow the other. And there's also a lot of discussions about optimal levels of T3 and T4. Like you've got to have them on the high end of the range. And in truth, there are some people who sometimes feel better that way. But again, those aren't reasons that justify starting thyroid medications. And even then, if someone is on thyroid medication and they adjust their medication trying to achieve a high T3 or a high T4, all that's going to happen is they're going to get too much and their TSH will go below range. So yeah, the TSH is directly tied to how much hormone you're taking when you're on medication, but T3 and T4 are not directly tied in. They're more tied to your body's own efforts to keep them in a state of balance. So to recap, you can have Hashimoto's and not have hypothyroidism. That's really common. That's most people. And you can have hypothyroidism without Hashimoto's, but that's super rare. Nearly everyone with hypothyroidism has it because of Hashimoto's, even if they don't have positive antibodies. So here's the thing, where do the symptoms come from? Well, if you've got Hashimoto's because you have thyroid antibodies or signs of it on your ultrasound, that's an autoimmune attack. Your immune system is attacking important parts of your thyroid and important parts of the rest of your body. And that by itself causes problems. That can cause symptoms, all the classic thyroid symptoms, the weight gain, the fatigue, the hair loss, the cold intolerance, the dry skin, the menstrual digestive problems, all this stuff. That can happen from the autoimmune stage, even when thyroid levels are perfectly normal. So yeah, even if someone doesn't have severe hypothyroidism, they can be symptomatic because of the autoimmunity. And here's the wrinkle about medications. They don't address autoimmunity. Many people are given thyroid medication because they have thyroid antibodies. And the doctor means well. The doctor thinks that doing so will cut the risk of the thyroid shutting down. But the data now is totally clear. They don't. There's no change in risk if someone's on medication or not. And the risk is actually kind of low. Someone with Hashimoto's has a higher risk of their thyroid shutting down than someone without it, but not that much higher. The background risk just for an adult woman is about 1% per year for severe hypothyroidism. If she has Hashimoto's, it's about 1.7% per year. So it's higher, but not all that big of a deal. So there's no reason to go on thyroid medication because of Hashimoto's, even when the symptoms are there. But it's important still to manage Hashimoto's, to be aware of it. It causes these symptoms. It also causes a lot of health risks. And we'll talk about that in all the future episodes about how to manage Hashimoto's. So you want to know if you have hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, or both. And most listeners here will have Hashimoto's, even if they have negative antibodies, but very few will have hypothyroidism bad enough to warrant medications. In this next installment, I'll talk in more in depth about the medication story. Do you need them? Do you not? What do you do if you're on them? So join me real soon and we'll talk through the medication issue. All right, Dr. C with you. Take great care. Hey, Dr. Christianson here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christianson on Facebook or Instagram. Write your question and use the hashtag #MedicalMyths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much, and I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.